Welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss topics related to sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. The Pharmacy Inspection Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, delivering quality and meaningful conversations and discussions about our pharmacy industry and the critical role pharmacists play in our healthcare systems. Learn more at pharmacypodcast.com. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
Hello, happy holidays, happy new year. Welcome to 2018 and to another episode of the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast. Very exciting. So 2017 was a great year, but out with the old, in with the new. A couple of quick announcements. You heard in the intro that we're now a part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, which Brian and I are really psyched about. So if you're listening to us for the first time, welcome. This is a show about all things compounding. I'm Seth DePasquale, pharmacist and co-owner of a pharmacy that compounds sterile injectable medications for horses. Brian Prince, my co-host, has been involved in the industry for a number of years as a workflow consultant for large pharmaceutical manufacturers, and more recently has been designing USB 800 and 797 compliant clean rooms for both large and small compounding pharmacies. So 2018, wow, I have a lot of great plans for this year. Of course, we're going to be doing a whole lot more of these episodes, bring to light issues within compounding, but we're also working on a couple other projects that hopefully will see the light of day in the next few months. More on that soon. Are you planning to make any changes this year? Personally, professionally? Let me know. Have a question about the topic we're talking about today or any other within compounding pharmacy or pharmacy in general? Send me an email at podcast@pharmacyInspection.com. Tweet at Pharmacy Inspect, Facebook message, carrier pigeon, whatever. You can even leave Brian and I a voicemail right on the website, pharmacyInspection.com. So we really hope to hear from you. But to the topic at hand. Today we'll be speaking with two gentlemen from Pharmetric Laboratory. Pharmetric specializes in rapid microbiological methodology for sterility testing of pharmaceutical compounds. While they also can do the traditional USP 71 compliant method for sterility testing, their validated process allows them to have sterility results to their clients in 5 days rather than 14 or 18. So really cool stuff. So today I'd like to welcome James Brown and Dr. Wayne DeHaven of Pharmetric Labs. So Jim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and Pharmetric.
I'm the director of sales for Pharmetric Laboratory for about 4.5 years now, and I go all over the country trying to find people like Seth who want an alternative testing method to some of the tests that they perform, they require.
And hello, my name's Wayne DeHaven, and I work for Pharmetric Lab, and I pretty much do a lot of the quality aspects to what we do, any sort of new scientific endeavors, qualification, validations, and those types of things.
So, one of the questions that I saw and what kind of motivated me to get back in touch with you guys is somebody was questioning on a listserv about method suitabilities. Mm-hmm. And I had a pretty good explanation for what a method suitability was, but it was honestly you, Wayne, that sort of got me on that track to really put all the pieces together in my own head. So I'd wonder if you would just kind of lay out what a method suitability is and why it's needed.
Sure. So method suitabilities can be, or the test itself can be for a variety of different types of microbiological tests. It really is like a validation of sorts. And for method suitability for microbiological tests, whether it be non-sterile or sterile, would be basically for the pharmaceutical industry to test to see if the process or the test that you're carrying out is going to be effective at doing what it should do for your product. The compendia explains how to do sterility test or bioburden test, depending on the chapter, and those chapters are sort of vague. They're written vague, where they give, specific guidelines, but a lot of the other parts are sort of, just words that are describing how you want to frame the test. And so there can be differences in volumes of media, slight differences in temperature, so there's different conditions and variabilities that are there. Different manufacturers of filters, all of this. And so in your process, and whoever you use as lab, or if you're doing it yourself, what you want to do is you want to make sure that whatever test procedure that you're going to do, let's say bioburden testing or sterility testing, that process is able to detect microorganisms in your product. Does that make sense? So in other words, it's basically showing that the test that you're doing is going to fit your product and do what it's supposed to do. A validation of sorts. Yeah, I think the key piece is, especially from like a compounding pharmacy or even from manufacturing standpoint, is the drug or your product itself is inhibitory in nature on microorganisms, in particular if you have preservatives or anything like that. And so the idea is, if you're doing a sterility test or if you're doing a bioburden test, you want to remove that inhibitory property of the drug itself, but capture whatever microorganism might be there and provide the environment in which it can then grow where you can detect. And so that's really, for a sterility test or for a bioburden test, you're really trying to remove any inhibitory properties of the drug and then allowing the microorganisms there, potentially that are there, to grow. So that's really the purpose of it, is to be able to show that is indeed what you're doing. That's done by spiking, for lack of better words, putting model microorganisms in your product for a period of time and looking to make sure you can detect them. If you can't, then that means that there's something that needs to be adjusted to overcome that inhibitory property of your drug.
Yeah, I think
Seth, I was a little not taken aback, but I was a little tickled when I saw the comment that said, "Is my lab trying to rip me off?" and inquiring and asking about method suitability tests. I go all over the country and I meet new people and new pharmacies, new compounding pharmacies, or new to Pharmetric Lab. And I will tell you that sometimes I talk to people who have never heard of the term method suitability. Okay, they don't know what I'm talking about, number one. And number two, I strongly suggest to a new client that a method suitability or a potential cross-reference to an existing method suitability with the correct criterion involved is done before sterility tests can be done. So when somebody said, "Is the lab trying to rip me off?" I would say absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, we are trying to actually protect you, because I am positive that inspectors are looking for evidence of method suitabilities per product. And we've had, Wayne can tell you, we've had very anxious and turbulent calls where people will say, hey, can you do a method suitability? I got the inspector coming in, they're asking for it, and we're kind of like, yeah, we kind of told you about this. We kind of warned you about this, but I would vehemently say, no, we're not trying to rip you off when we talk about the necessity for method suitability. Absolutely not.
Yeah, I've had this discussion with Wayne at length, and he even alluded to the fact that he's like, a lot of times we're actually losing money on that deal. It's not a great deal for us either.
Yeah.
So
no, but it's a critical piece. I mean, I'll take it a step further from James. Yeah, it's like the inspectors look for it. The reality is you're not meeting the compendia if you don't do it.
Correct.
You're not meeting USP 71 if you don't have the method suitability test to support the testing that you're carrying out. That's the true black and white of it.
Yeah.
So, because it says right in there, I mean, you have to have that method suitability test to support your testing.
So, I'll just give a little bit of a background about how I guess I got to even come in contact with you guys. So I actually was at a board of pharmacy meeting in Florida. At one time, the pharmacy we had to go down there and present information and data saying that we are compliant and basically to get our license back. But in that meeting was the owner and president of Pharmetric, who really honestly just blew me away. His discussion points and what he talked about with the luminescence, bioluminescence technology. I had never honestly even heard of any of this stuff, but it really, the whole concept just opened up a whole new door in my brain. So, for other people that are not aware that there are actual other tests out there that can be done, that will get your sterility testing results done within just a few days rather than 14 to 21. Tell us a little bit about some of that rapid microbiome testing that you guys perform and how it's done.
I call it not necessarily rapid. We have a chemist here that works with us, and he's like looking at it, and we're doing some validation studies, and he says, rapid, how is 5 days rapid? It's not really rapid. He's thinking, rapid would be something quick. But so I think of all of the methodologies or technologies are not necessarily underneath the umbrella of rapid, but more underneath an umbrella of alternative. And so it's alternative microbiological methods or alternative methods that you're going to use for any sort of test, quality assurance test that you're doing. And there's a variety of them. Not always is it just for the rapidness of it, although especially with microbiology, there's a lot of incubation periods and things like that which take a lot of time. But I think the USP is clear in that it sort of is describing something that you can use these alternative methods if they provide an advantage. Time is definitely one. Inventory, those types of things that you can control better if you have something that's less time in the incubator and less time where you can now manage what your stocks and things are. So that is one aspect to it. I think also, and a very big one for me, is the technology allows for more of a robust machine that's reading something out rather than a person that's visually looking for turbidity. I think that the technologies are very good to give you robust results regardless of how long it's in the incubator, if you need it or don't. With all types of technology, I believe that you have to understand the limitations because everything has a limitation. So there's multiple. The one that the company I work for, Pharmetric, uses is ATP bioluminescence. That's a technology in which all cells have obviously ATP as their energy source, and so we're looking for the presence of ATP in the culture media. It's identical to the compendial method in that you are going to predominantly filter your drug. You're going to do a rinsing solution. You're going to put the filter into growth media at 2 temperatures under 2 different growth media, one that allows for anaerobes to grow, one is just a general tryptic soy broth. And then over a period of time, you're going to let enrichment occur. You're going to incubate those samples for a period of time. Now you can reduce that time because you're not waiting for visual turbidity. You're actually going to read out the ATP, so you don't need to visually see it. And so there's validation that's involved with that to show that the method are equivalent to each other, a visual test versus the ATP bioluminescence readout. But there's other alternative methods as well. That's one. that we use, and we're confident with that one because it allows you to do some of the other sort of methodologies. You can do direct method, you can do filtration, and it's more flexible to a variety of products. There's other ones where you can use PCR, you could use flow cytometry, you could use. There's a lot of different ways to detect microorganisms, each of them having limitations. So with ATP bioluminescence, obviously you don't want to have a product that has a lot of ATP in it. You're not going to be able to detect. You're going to have a high background. With ATP bioluminescence, you can't read same day. So there's still an incubation period involved with that. That's one piece we actually like because we are matching compendia. We're just changing a readout and shortening the time. But it's the same process as the compendial method. But other methods are not. Some of them you have to fix, stain. Some of them you have to read under microscope. Some of them you have to do PCR, like I said. And there's several different approaches out there, all being alternative, all having pluses, and all also having limitations that you have to be aware of. And I think that's the key piece with validation and understanding those limitations and being able to control. But otherwise, the reality is the compendial method is old, outdated, and these technologies allow you to have more robust results, less human subjective influence, and very clear quantitative output, binary output, but clear results that are very robust and reproducible. So that's my take on why alternative methods are so important, actually.
I was just going to ask, so specifically, like, okay, so every living organism is producing ATP for energy purposes, more or less. And how specific or how specific is that method? Like, can it detect one little ATP molecule, or does there have to be multiple bacteria producing ATP in order for that to detect it? Like, what's the and maybe that's not the right term, the specificity.
Yeah, you're going down the validation path, discussion, and I think which is an important one. So a couple comments that I can add is, number one, I think everyone is aware and should be aware that a sterility test is not necessarily a test for sterility. Obviously, you can't test every single vial in your batch. It's destructive test, so you wouldn't be able to do that. It's a quality assurance test that's monitoring your sterility assurance in your process. So, point one. Point two is for an alternative method to be used, it should be validated per USP general chapter or per some sort of scientific logical approach using statistics, looking at what you said, one of the pieces, specificity, accuracy, precision, equivalence, limit of detection, and those aspects. Those are done by doing parallel studies. If you want to compare it to a compendial test, you're going to test compendially some samples, and you'll be doing the same readout using whatever sort of alternative approach you're going to do. And you're going to use a statistical comparison of those to show that one's not superior to the other, or maybe one is, and then also test to see if they're equivalent. And you look at that, you also look at limit of detections and things like that. As for limit of detection, so you said, can it pick up one cell? Obviously, if you're doing certain types of flow cytometry or things like that, yes, you can pick up one cell. I think some of that defines some of the limitations that I was alluding to of certain systems. You might pick up one cell. Does that mean if I did it in a compendial test, that one cell would turn into enough where I would visually see it. Is it a bacterial cell? How do you define that? So there's all of that you have to scientifically, wrap your head around and determine what, and have these scientists use these methods and develop them on how they then can be used. Because that limit of detection, generally speaking, is about 1 CFU is sort of the standard. And I don't know how familiar you are with CFU, but CFU isn't one cell. It depends on the microorganism, so it could be a few cells. But that CFU is then going to, under enriching environments, is going to multiply. And so we have run our validation where we take a range of CFU of specific microorganisms, and we then culture and we compare a compendial versus an alternative method, and we make sure that when we see no growth or when we see growth, we get a similar result for both systems, and we statistically compare those. So it's not, for ATP bioluminescence, it's not one cell. Can the technology get there? The reality is that one cell, there's ATP everywhere. You would have to have such a controlled environment to pick it up. I believe it can get down to around 100 cells. But that is, under a super controlled environment. That's why there's that enrichment phase. That's why it goes in the incubator, and you allow the cells to divide and grow. That said, under validation conditions, the compendial method and the ATP bioluminescence method are equivalent statistically. So under that enrichment phase, under a period of time in the incubator, there's no difference in the results.
I just wanted to say something from my standpoint. You asked about RMM and some of the myths about it. I had a couple customers from your neck of the woods who told me point blank that because of the rapid response method that we use, and she could have used another company, but she did gels and suspensions, and that other company couldn't do that we actually allowed her to stay in business. Okay. That because she was able to turn around her products much more quickly and move her inventory and respond to requests from doctors much more quickly. She told me point blank she was able to stay in business. And, that's a real life benefit that I've had several people tell me that.
Yeah, when we're talking about alternative methods, and again, we've already kind of said this, but when the big draw to any kind of alternative method, at least from the compounder standpoint, is going to be the rapidity of it. How quickly can you turn these results around? And I think the same thing goes for in the FDA regulated space, like GMP. I read a whole lot of articles about rapid micro testing and how they're begging for it as well. So yeah, I think all around, if I can send it off to a lab, get the results back within 4 to 5 days versus, and actually then start being able to sell that product versus waiting 21 days. That's just an obvious cash flow issue that you're taking care of. So yeah.
We've had examples. I've had examples shared to me of industry, like in particular for non-sterile things, because a lot of things that we use in our daily life, we don't realize that, but the companies are getting bioburden testing to that, whether it's ink from a cartridge in their printer or the detergent they're using in the laundry. All the starting material is getting tested for microorganism, and those things require a very fast turnaround. So those, obviously, the standard is driven towards some sort of technology, ATP bioluminescence, to test those and screen them quickly, because I've heard stories where the companies actually will not interface with any sort of vendor unless they have a certain type of alternative rapid method to get rapid turnaround and get results to them, and their starting material is being tested. And so it's critical, yes, from an inventory standpoint. And I've heard stories of companies having the product on their truck and the results come out in 24 hours and it's already on the truck at the location where it's getting dropped off, the grocery store or whatever. And so that's their control of inventory. They don't have to have as much starting material. They can really speed things up. And they're so confident with the results and their consistency with the results that they can sort of already know what the result's going to be in essence, and they have enough confidence where they can do that. But I don't want to like short the other side of it. From my perspective, is I'll tell you that you know, pulling anything away from human bias to me is like we have experiences here in the lab that, you know, if you read out on the machine, you're confident in the result. It's not someone that's subjected to, you know, was there something in there? Was it a dust particle or something like that, where you could give a false positive, or likewise, you definitely don't want to give a false negative. And so reading it out and having that capability is extremely important. So I didn't want to reduce sort of the value of that. I know that's not what the pharmacist really recognizes. They're looking for that speed, but it's also the technical aspect of being able to use these things as indicators is extremely important. It's extremely robust results and very accurate, specific results that you get. So
I think from the pharmacist point of view, it's so hard to like picture like, all right, I send this off into the ether and, you know, a piece of paper magically appears in my inbox so many days later. It's hard for us to like picture what is actually going on. But when you're talking about like somebody subjectively looking at something, so, you know, just to kind of give a visual, what's going on is, you know, they're taking your product, putting it basically in growth medium to see if anything grows in it. And if at the end of that 14 days, and this happens a lot in my case with a lot of the formulations that we have, if there's turbidity, if it's cloudy at all, they then have to like go through the process of, I believe, plating it out. Is that what they do?
What we do is we take a small aliquot of that and put it into fresh media for an additional 4 days.
Okay.
You know, additional time in the incubator. We look for the compendial test. And USP 71 describes this. You don't necessarily just put it into media and then don't look at it for 14 days. You actually are looking at it on a daily basis, and you're looking for changes over time, basically, and you're also documenting that, and you're also then knowing that if the starting material is it leaves the media turbid itself, that you're going to end up going an extra 4 days. So you want to then add new media, taking a small aliquot out and testing to see if you then get growth.
I'm sorry, Wayne. Just to clarify, Seth, Pharmetric Laboratory does a vast majority of our sterility tests with the rapid results method. However, we also do provide and perform compendial tests.
That was actually my next question. Yep.
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure you understood that, because frankly, we have some customers who demand that we do the compendial test, and a vast majority of those customers do business in California. And unfortunately, at this stage, California does not recognize results from rapid result testing from any company. And we are involved with that. So we have maintained our business with those former rapid result clients who now are doing compendial tests with Pharmetric Lab. So I just want to make sure that is understood, that, you know, we do a vast majority of our tests are done with the rapid result method. However, or as Wayne likes to say, the alternative method. However, we do some compendial tests.
And, you know, it's odd that you guys have run into that stumbling block, even though right in the compendia, it gives you it says you can do alternative testing if it meets or exceeds the method that's explained in 71. So I don't know. You guys might be able to speak more to that, or if you even want to touch that grenade. But they're just simply not even following the USP standards at that point. If they're saying no, you can't use this method. I don't know.
I know that California has had communication with some consultants, with other companies, with people on the USB committee. I don't think it's a permanent thing. I think they're going to have to recognize that these things are actually providing a benefit not only to the pharmacies or the manufacturers or whoever, but actually to the patient. So I think there's going to be a point where it has to be recognized. I just think, their knee-jerk reaction was to put up a wall and then try to learn and understand. I think it's going a little too slow, for my own personal opinion, but I don't think there was any sort of. I just think it was lack of understanding, and I think that eventually has to change. There are obviously manufacturers that get these types of technologies approved for their products. I'm trying to look and see if I can. I was just looking in a search, see if I can find it. Obviously, as you said, so USP's perspective, they provide mechanisms for the implementation of alternative methods. It says in the general notices, alternative methods and/or procedures may be used if they provide advantages in terms of accuracy, sensitivity, precision, selectivity, or adaptability to automation or computerized data reduction or in other special circumstances. With regard to sterility tests, bioburden testing, obviously you're definitely going to then be able to have less sort of, it's automating it and it's taking human sort of factors out of it. So, like I said, as long as that validation piece is carried out, it's acceptable and it provides a lot of advantages both to the patient and to the pharmacy.
So, first episode of the new year, and I think we're off to a great start. We have a goal of keeping these podcasts under 30 minutes, but many times our actual conversations run longer, and there's a ton more information that is extremely valuable. This episode was no exception. I'm going to be releasing the longer episode to my email subscribers. That's just over an hour long, and we'll be talking about some USP 800 topics like wiped sampling, and also a little bit about endotoxin testing to clear up some confusion there. So if you haven't subscribed yet, head over to the website, click subscribe in the top menu, and put in your email address. I'll be sending that out tomorrow, along with another episode I had promised earlier. Next week, another excellent episode that I honestly just can't wait for. We'll be speaking with Joe Caballero and Bill Mixon about the proposed compounding board specialty. It's going to be a great discussion, and honestly, you do not want to miss it. So I hope you'll join us next week. Until then, keep raising the bar.